Jeff, I just want to answer your LinkedIn post about the welder job announcement and how reading is kind of a requirement for skills to be able to do that type of job. Um, and I want to do it in a video format because it's kind of faster to do it and tell a story, and it's easier to kind of do it this way. Um, so I'm gonna give a story, some anecdotes, actually quite a few anecdotes here across over time because they actually kind of uh, answer the question, help us understand and bring it back. Um, so back in 1990, I kind of embarked on a journey that had been at for 3 decades. Didn't realize it was going to be this long, but it has been working with unwritten languages. And I wanted to do something I'd done my bachelor's degree, and I actually did two bachelor's degrees. Did one degree in textual text analysis and comparative literature and text analysis, and and then I did in comparative literature and that kind of stuff. And I did a second degree in a bachelor's in French, French literature and French linguistics, and but a lot of literature classes. And I just for my master's degree, I came to France and then came back again. Want to be a language teacher, and one of the things that I really wanted to do was find something different that not everyone else had done before. And so I actually discovered Creole languages, and they kind of focused on the Caribbean Creole language. And that whole story is told elsewhere in more detail, but uh, I kind of tell the story about my Microsoft research lecture or something. I told the story more about that. Um, but up on, you can see these are unwritten, or these are languages that are mainly oral tradition languages. And so I've been spending a lot of a lot of my training in linguistics is on field work and how to go and get into unwritten language or oral tradition languages and unwritten language context, and then to describe them so that you can turn them into written languages. And usually the focus when you do that is work on folklore stories. This is kind of the one of the areas that are that you can that applies to people where they're at in these kinds of languages. Because I have a lot of storytellers, and then having the that type of approach, and so what I did a few years ago was I made a video up on my YouTube channel of telling one of the folklore stories of you know animals in St. Lucian Creole, and I'm using plush animals to explain the story, and it's very visual. This kind of way that these stories are told is all visual. Storyteller would do it, and they told with it, they did, and I just telling the story with plush animals to explain the same thing. Okay, um, and a lot of these languages are very unwritten languages are visual. They are they reply they they focus on restating things, saying things again. So you memorize, and then you tell them the story, and people are memorizing. That's how you that's how you that's how you learn. And it's how we learn as children with our parents. How we learn in a context that we do everything by actions. Okay, so that's kind of the first thing that the storytelling aspect. And I'm gonna get to the welder job announcement because I think this is the behind the things is this is how everyone learns language. I mean, your first language is the first language is your spoken language. Written language is a language. It's a second language to every person on this planet. No one learns a written language first. They learn spoken language and hearing and speaking first. Then they go to school. Okay, homeschooling you want, but school, and you learn written language in a school environment. That's a second language. So some get good at it and some don't. Okay, and that's okay. Everyone survives in the end. Uh, but some then go on to use written language more than others do. Okay, and some used it more frequency than others do. So written language is a kind of a variable, and not everybody's great at it. And we all kind of laugh when people are making spelling mistakes between there, and it's okay. And I do mistakes too, and sometimes use the wrong word, and I correct it. Yeah, I got advanced degrees. Okay, it's just a lot of this is visual, Okay, a lot of this is visual. The second thing um, is that I spent 8 years of early on in my career being a language teacher, and not just in universities. Okay, I did in universities, but I also did in business language schools for professionals, for kind of like me. In my job, people want to learn another language. They need to advance their skills in that for some kind of reason. Taught English and French in two different countries, and the majority of what I did, my teaching approach, both in group lessons and even private lessons. I did a lot of private stuff. I even did phone call lessons. Okay, phone calls. We'd send faxes to the students. They have to prepare things and be ready to have a discussion on the phone. And a lot of these people were, doctors, pharmacists, working for other people working in the food industry, people, all kinds of mixed bag of nuts of kind of people. Those were in the private business schools, but I did a lot of language teaching groups too, in those schools and in the universities. And the majority I did was drawing. And I admit I suck at drawings, okay? My wife actually did a lot of my drawings and all my transparencies back then. We had transparencies. She did a lot of those because she's a way better drawer. I am way better. But I survived being a language teacher for several years even before that. I got married. And I would draw just if I got to draw a stick person, I'll draw a stick person. Yeah, and if they look like they get they look like they get a golf club as their leg and their foot. Hey, that's it. It gets the message across, and it worked. It totally worked. Okay, but it's better to have drawings a little bit better for some things. A lot is based on drawings on the board, and gestures and kinesics, which is basically distance and where you are in the room and all that. And later on, I learned that it's called total physical response method of teaching languages. I learned this years after I've been actually teaching it. A lot of skit playing, and I remember that in 1990 when I came to France for a year and just kind of taught some English for a year and had a fellowship and then came back and went back to the States. I took a ton of teaching assets, authentic teaching assets with me. Train tickets, money, bus passes, student ID cards, stamps. Just when I went back to teach French at the university, I wanted to have all these things because I wanted to do skits. I wanted everything that we were doing to be focused on this visual and gesture approach. Total physical response. Just you're doing the actions and learning language at the same time. And some of the things I do is you buy train tickets, you go to the bank, you book a room at a hotel or youth hostel, you buy stamps, buying a sandwich at the bakery, and put the students in that context and make them do the skits. Or what do you want to do? Role playing. It's role playing basically. And that worked really well. Okay, it always worked well. And I will say that I've got personal postcards and letters from some of the people that I taught, business professional I taught language to, that after I'd left the thing to come back to a different country or some job, I would receive personal Christmas cards saying thank you so much because I hated learning the language. I hated it, and you just made this so real. Okay, just made it real. It wasn't this kind of ed thing. It just made it real, and that I thought that was my strong point. And I think that this is what has helped me to understand moving onward. And we're going to keep coming to this welder job announcement that visuals and gestures and it's 75% of language learning. Okay, the words actual written words are a very small part of language learning and acquisition, a very small part, and language use. Okay, except in some jobs. Okay, some jobs you might do a ton of it, and I do a lot of writing of all kinds of things. But yeah, when I write business magazine articles, kind of stuff, there's stuff, but I got to put visuals in there too, to kind of help too. So, but then during that kind of teaching time, what kind of was a few serendipity moments or a few things that helped me understand how important this really was, and this is really going to come to that because it's going to where I'm going to wrap it around to a job a little bit later. But I had two different students during one year. Um, One was during the day, and one was an evening student, an evening class student. One was during the day, and she was dyslexic, and she said that she had been diagnosed as being dyslexic late in life. Um, yeah, I don't know how old, but wasn't a child. Okay, and she was always asking how and I was always trying to find new approaches to help language learning because she kind of caught that. And she said, "How can you help when they dyslexia?" And I was constantly thinking about this, how to do this. And the focus was then making all this role playing stuff, and because that's easier. And I'll say right now, I have a dyslexic adopted son, and I try to adapt everything I do to um, more towards uh, visual things with him, and that's been more effective. When I figured out when he was small that he had dyslexia, or he's dyslexic, and his teachers didn't quite get it, and I got it really quickly. And it was constantly trying to adapt learning strategy, teaching. Just I don't want to call this learning or teaching, but that's what we do as parents. So just trying to adapt my strategies with him compared to his brother. So uh, and then the second student I had was, and this was really an eye-opening moment, was it was in 1991, and evening classes had a student that just couldn't get I was teaching French at the university, and he was taking evening classes and taking this French class, and he just couldn't get it. He couldn't get it. He was really struggling with the pronunciation, struggling with the words, how to write them, um, and uh, and so we go out for lunch one day, and we're talking. And he's just saying, how can I learn this? And so I asked him a couple questions. Okay, I'll just call him Bob. I can't remember his name, but I said, Bob, what are you're doing these evening classes, and you know why are you taking the classes? Why are you at the university? What are you doing? Why are you doing it? And he's an adult student. Okay, adult. Okay, probably in the 40s to 50s range. Okay, and he said he was doing a degree in geology. Geology. Okay. And I said, what do you do for your job? Because it's an evening class, so you get a job during the day. What do you do? And he says he's a banker. Okay, so he's a banker, and he's doing a degree in geology. And so I'm trying to get the dotted lines to kind of connect here. And then I said, okay, well, what do you do for your hobbies and stuff? And he says he's a cook. And I said, wow, I understand. And he says, what, Jeff? What, Jeff? And I said, what? And he said, what is it? What do you understand? I said, hey, you're tactile. And he says, what's that? Okay. Now we know what tactile is because we talked about tactile touchscreens, okay? But back then it was kind of like this, geeky word from linguistics. Um, and a tactile learner, someone that learns by, told him, I said, I bet that when you are okay in your job at the bank, a lot of this stuff, okay, there's money, but a lot of it's just it's written information. Okay, it kind of depends on the job you got at the bank too, but I don't think he was a teller at the bank. I think he had a more like a management position, so it's a lot of written stuff. Some numbers, but a lot of written stuff. But I said, I imagine that you're doing a degree in geology, or let's say you're cooking is your hobby, okay? And so it's not reading the cookbook and learning the information from the cookbook that you really like. It's touching the food, right? It's grating the carrots and cutting up the potatoes, and he says, yeah, exactly. Okay. And then, and I said that I can imagine that you're doing a degree in geology because it's not reading those books about the rocks, it's touching the rocks, right? It's touching the rocks. He says, yeah. And he says, and so how can you help me with French? I said, I don't know. Okay. No, I did actually from that moment, I completely changed my teaching strategy, or completely changed it. I really focused on it's called total physical response from the 1970s. You do actions, do role playing. So that's where it came. The role playing it became very important later on that year and afterwards, and for the rest of my teaching career, that part of my time of life, and for the rest of my career. Okay, so so in whatever job I have, it it the not 75% of communication is visual and gestures and actions and what we do. 75%. The problem is we remove that when we do voice podcasts only, or if we have written. We remove 75% communication, and this is what happens when people write in capital letters and on a blog and stuff. They stop screaming. Well, no, it might be because they have a visual difficulty, and so they're trying to read the text, and they only can read the text that have capital letters because you can see it easily by putting the caps lock on a small screen or something. And it's not about screaming, but people interpret that as screaming, but it's not. It kind of depends. Kind of depends the situation. So but some people need to have those, those visual cues because we're missing a lot of that. We're missing intonation. We're missing things. So when you do a video or you do a visual or in a real live presentation, you're getting all the things here. You're getting my intonation, getting my speed that I'm talking. Sometimes I slow down. Sometimes I speed up. I'm doing some visual. Put my hands in a certain time. Um, you can hear the pauses. The pauses are just important as the actual speaking and and the some, the kind of the interjection modes or the words are important too. This is communication, and this is what you miss when you extract things out and just have text. This is the most difficult thing with text. Um, and there are now subtitling and caption ways that you can do emphasis and stuff. And there's some cool technology to trying to do that with subtitles and captions to bring in speed and emphasis into the captions and the subtitles of the films or whatever they may be. I won't go into the details of that, but because I want to get the story to tell this thing about the welding job announcement. So then, during that whole time too, I also was teaching in the late 80s and to up until the mid 90s. I got this book. It's called the dictionary. It's a visual dictionary, okay? And it's all pictures. It's just pictures. They get some words. They get the words for it. But I mean, just clothing and trains and gardens and stuff and yards and furniture and all that stuff. So sorry that the lighting's it's not great. I got the sunlight in the window here, but natural lighting here. But the visual dictionary, I got that sometime, and it was published in the 1980s, and I got that sometime in the 1990s, and that I think bam, that helped me understand that the visual thing is really important. It's kind of all happening about that same time. So I got out of, I don't want to say I got out of language teaching. I kind of evolved into a new job where I got a job at, I left academia and got a job as a technical writing trainer at Caterpillar, the big yellow machines. And kind of big expensive yellow machines, and where the user manuals and the service guides are pretty important. You don't want Cracker Jacks, kind of authoring and Cracker Jacks kind of translations, because these are like $1 million machines or more, and so you want to make sure that they're good, because you want to make sure that people don't die, okay, in doing something, or they don't kill people while repairing machine, or by activating controls on a machine with a dumpster. You can kind of kill people if you dump a whole load of rocks on people, or the machine implement like falls. Okay, so the first few days of my job at Caterpillar, uh, and and there were those of us where the whole thing was trying to put in a new authoring environment and a new translation tool environment with 150 authors, all on the same floor in the same building, and about 20 technical translators on the same floor in the same building, with an additional maybe 10 vendor translation agencies that were even local and some farther away. And but the majority of people were on site together. They could go walk across the floor and go talk with somebody and figure it out. Okay. And only one person maybe just up the road 30 miles away. And and then a few of the translators were phone calls. This 1990s, so this is before we had a lot of these Skype for business and all this kind of visual things for video conferencing, all that. That was the context. And so the first day I'm sitting there watching this, and I'm listening to a brown bag lunch and hearing my colleagues, and the colleagues who are working on the controlled language authoring and the machine translation thing, all of us that were kind of brought into Caterpillar to kind of implement this. Okay, it was developed by Carnegie Group Incorporated, and for the CGI for the controlled language authoring part. And then I think IBM did the workflow, and I think Oracle did the kind of some of the forms and the things to be able to create the database of objects and all that, if I remember correctly. And then Carnegie Mellon University was one that did the translation system. It's all bundled together. It's kind of a really complex system. Arbortext was the editor, HTML editor. Caterpillar put them on the map with this, basically. Funded them at the beginning and get them started, and yeah, it became a pretty well-known editor, and for a year, yeah, it's been pretty used. That went from HTML to XML. This was the HTML times, and so we had a really complex system, okay, with these 150 people. And so I'm listening to the first day of my colleagues explaining this to colleagues, and it just sounded really like my colleagues talk about anaphora, cataphora, and anaphora, and elliptical clauses stuff. I'm kind of listening to my colleague, and we, the implementers at Caterpillar, we are all masters and doctoral, PhDs and stuff. That's kind of our backgrounds. We did have one of the other colleagues on the control language team that he was a mechanic that had an MA, a master's degree in linguistics. So that's kind of an oddball kind of thing. And I'd been a bicycle mechanic in college at a couple of different places, and then I had done my bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees in linguistics too. So kind of an oddball as well. But a lot of these folks were some of their computational linguistics stuff, linguists and other things, just linguists, and that's fine, But this is a different context here. So coming in, what I did is spent the first few months. I was hired in January, and I spent the first couple of months just hanging out with the guys. And I'm going to say guys because there were a few gals, there were a few women. More in the translation department, but actually in the authoring department, a few less. But it was really a guy-dominated, a male-dominated context. So I'll just say guys for that, and because what they talked about. And so a lot of these guys, when I go talk with them and kind of figure out who they are and stuff, their main interests were knife collections and Harley Davidson bikes, motorcycles, okay? And I was the outcast. I considered my kind of the rebel of the outcast because I would mention my Honda CB 500, 1976, and I'd mention my 1982 Suzuki 750, which was not a Harley Davidson at all. So they would kind of laugh at me. But hey, I was able to identify them. They were able to identify with me, and that meant much more than some of my other colleagues who weren't like at all in this kind of stuff. So I have to use things to relate with people. And then I during that time, this was on the Caterpillar technical English implementation in the 1990s, and there's plenty about that. You can find things I've written about in conference. I've written a number of things about it too. But I looked back at the previous 1970s approach at Caterpillar. They had some materials on the user documentation. It's called Caterpillar Fundamental English. So that was CFE. The materials, and they had reduced that 20 years before had reduced vocabulary, images, pictures, images. It's just mainly that. It was really reduced vocabulary down to under 1,000 terms and all image based, and that had been abandoned. I don't know all the details of that, but it had kind of been abandoned. And then 20 years later, in 1990s, there was this new complex authoring system, translation system, full workflow, everything. Okay, massive amounts of money thrown at this thing, investment. And so So then what I did was from that experience of kind of getting to know the guys, the folks that were doing their techno writing on the floor and all that, I said to management, I asked management to do. I really felt that because of the complexity that we're getting into, that we really need to have a grammar refresher course. And I got it from all the line managers. I was allowed to only do 3 2-hour sessions with the entire audience, including tests. Couldn't do tests outside of the class. You got to do it all. That's a challenge, okay? Um, this is like a semester course, folks. A semester course at the university. But I'm allowed to give 3 2-hour sessions, including the tests. And so I embarked on that thing for, I don't know, a couple of weeks. And what I did was I went down to the local library and I looked up those Saturday morning grammar rock commercials. Conjunction junction, what's your function? Da 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 da. Or I'm just a bill. Da 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 da. And I looked those up and I watched those videos, those DVDs, or at the time where they were cassettes, very much of them VHS cassettes, and and I watched them and watched them, watched them, watched them at the library, or I took them home and checked them out and watched them, and they're all visual. And I really was inspired by that. That was my main thing to be able to take this on. Now, now the grammar. This is after the grammar courses. With the grammar courses, I got the scores, and I found that the scores were not up to par at all. And all the editors weren't getting the levels. They were all stable, and they weren't seeing the need. And all the students, the younger generation, were the older folks have been around for a while, just don't really care. To be told when you're getting in the class, you could see people. I'd say, hey, we need to work on this now because, and it was all about nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. Really simple. I mean, and I took all their material, I took all their training materials, or all their written documentation, just had them underline, put boxes around, and circle nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. And the scores were okay. Um, and we did pre-test and post-test, and it was the same thing. I just jumbled them all up and changed the positions where they were, so they didn't recognize it. But it's the same exact content. So the scores would be just, it was exact same material. So it was just so they couldn't recognize it after the classes, after these 3 classes. And the scores were, of course, so the editors, like I said, they kept a stable kind of middle average score. Nothing great, nothing bad, but and there were some students and there were some folks that just kept low, and then there were younger generation, the younger generation, the 20-year-olds, 25-year-olds, which they jumped from like a low score 17 to 51, wham! And I saw this and I said, okay, but the majority of people just weren't grasping. I was kind of worried because I would say, hey, we're gonna, we need to work on these 6 hours of classes. We need to do this because in six months you will be using this, fairly complex authoring system. And you hear from the back of the room, 6 years, 4 months, 3 days, and these folks are counting their retirement down to days down to the retirement. They got the counter on, countdown timer. And I'm thinking, oh man, this can be tough. And so that's when I got in the conjunction junction, and I need to make this visual. I need to do this, okay? So that's why kind of the timing here is important when things are happening. That pushed me to go ahead and go to the local library. And so the first day of the training course, of the actual authoring system training course, on top of it too is that the pilot person they did to do the kind of the new authoring was a guy he was about ready to retire. And he told me 6 years before he had been, he was just dictating the text, the things to a secretary who was actually typing it down on paper, and then they put it in the system. So he had in 6 years had to learn to type. And I mean, he was a 2-finger guy. I mean, even worse than like a cop. The kind of the joke is that the police officers only had to type 2 fingers. This guy struggled with 2 fingers too, and he's the pilot guy. He's the one making the decision on whether we use the system or not. And it's like, oh boy. And And I won't go to the other examples because there were other ones too. It's like we got to be walking on eggshells with this guy. Got to make sure that he's happy, and because he's making the decision, his decision is going to keep me in the job. Okay, so um, and um, and so the first day of the training of the authoring system, after all the grammar courses, after the trying to take a visual approach and think about the conjunction, junction, and all these grammar rock commercials, I came in the class with um, the training class, and the first thing that I did was I drew up on the board a a diagram of a bicycle. Okay, because like I said, I'm not a very good drawer. I can't drawing is not my forte. But I drew a picture of a bicycle, and then I said, okay, let's imagine this as a motorcycle. I drew it because I said I'm a bad drawer, so just imagine a motorcycle, folks, guys. And I said, what are the essentials? What are the essential components of a motorcycle? And got them thinking, wow. And it was a brainstorming session for a few minutes. It was really for them. I was like, "Hey, we're coming to an authoring thing. What's this?" Um, and I just said, "What are the essential components of your motorcycle?" And they started coming up with it. Handlebars. Um, need to have a starter, something to start the machine. To have an engine, you got to have a way to start the engine. Need to have two wheels. Need to have a frame. I need to have a drivetrain to make it work. Of a motorized motorcycle. And then what are the accessories? I said, what are the accessories? What are the things you don't have to have, but it would be nice to have? Nice to have, but you don't have to have. And some of those were, like kick pegs, foot pegs, blinkers, mirrors, headlight, backlight, taillight. Even the seat could be an accessory. If you're in a dirt bike, you can kind of ride a dirt bike without having it's not fun, but hey, it can be done. Okay. And and then I shifted the focus. Okay, now we got the down to components. What is necessary and essential? What is extra accessories? Now let's go to a sentence because we want to bring this to where our current kind of training is about. And I said, what are the essentials of a sentence? And the boy, that's just like, whoa, they had never thought about this. I said, okay, so let's take an example, folks. This is the Central Illinois. We're in the Bible Belt. So I said, okay, what is the shortest verse in the Bible? New Testament, folks. I don't Not the Old Testament, just the New Testament. Whoa, they're just like, come on, folks, what's the shortest verse? Um, and they didn't know. I said, okay, I'll tell you what it is. So John 11:35. It's the verse Jesus wept. Jesus cried. Jesus wept. And I said, that verse tells you the essentials of a sentence without having to go through a whole sentence, like the grammar course that we went through a few months before. I said, here I'm going to give you the essentials of a sentence with a verse, a Bible verse. And what are they? Well, there's only two words, so this is really easy to figure out. It's the action, wept or cry, and it's the actor who's doing it, the action. Um, and then I said, okay, so and we can give some other meta language terms to that, like what we learned in in the grammar course. I'd not used noun, verb, and all that kind of stuff. I used other words, person, place, or thing, action. I used the same things from that Grammar Rock series during that grammar course, the grammar course. And here I brought it back again, and I said, so the action is to cry or weep. And we can call it a verb in the system, that's called this system here. And the actor, the one doing the action, we can call that a noun. And this began to they began to connect the dots here. And I said, okay, so those are the two things you have to have in a sentence. And I said, on top of it, you can have a shorter sentence. It can be one verb. It can be one word. It can be go, leave. It's an action. It's an order, but it implies there's an underlying kind of implication that it's you, because that's an order. You singularly, you plural, but it's an underlying thing. So you have to put you in parentheses and say, hey, this is underlying. And actually in Spanish, I gave the example Spanish. You don't even have to have the actual pronoun, the person that's actually doing the action. The actual the verb itself is conjugated in a way that it includes the pronoun. And not just kind of give that example, but here it's underlined. And I said the rest of the things about where the crying or weeping was happening, the audience that was around, the when it was happening, where it was happening, why it was happening, and other things are accessories. You don't have to have the information, but it adds more context. It helps build the context. All right. So so this that um, I mean that helps set the scene and for people to understand some basic things. And I received some. Uh, okay, I can say my colleagues, my linguist colleagues, weren't too happy with what I was, my approach because I really simplified the whole thing. And I had actually broken down all of the 150 writing rules into 20, the 150 writing rules and down to a limited set of 20 meta rules or mega rules or what do you want to call these things, like ing words. And every time you use an ing word, hey, red flag should go up. Okay, and look at John Cole's, global style guide of English, and he's got he outlines all the different detailed ones. But I just tried to simplify them so that people could actually think about what they are in an imaged way, because I want to give them an image in mind. Use ing words, red flag. Okay. Use these types of ed words with ed at the end, red. Got the flag. Okay. How am I using that ed word? And then go look up in the system, and the system will tell me the examples. I just wanted to simplify it for them to help them navigate down through the information. And to get to the rules that help them get their task done, because their job is to help them to get their task done, to write the content, not to spend time just going through and clicking on buttons and stuff. And that's what the system would end up doing if they weren't familiar enough with it. Um, and and the last example, Caterpillar, which I think is really relevant here, was um, the during that time there was an exhibition. There was actually in the hallway at the front on the main building. There had been they had they had an example of what the new generation of authoring is doing. Because here we're talking about the writing the documentation, writing all that. But in the end, what does it come to at the person at the end who's the end user? And this was a great thing. So they had a computer cube. They had these little cubes at the time. They were 128 mega RAM at the time, and they had a touch screen that you plug into the computer. And remember, these are so you get different types of users. You get the users that are actually driving the machines, maneuvering the different so they had joysticks, gloves, levers, steering wheel, different types of ways to drive the machine. Um, but then you had the service technicians who the service manuals that to repair the machine. And the service, and so what they were doing is focusing on how the service technicians would be using this documentation. So it's all HTML, doing the markup so that you can actually navigate down through. So you come down to this, you come to the touch screen, tactile screen. You start with, okay, I want to get documentation. Then I want to go to the product line, what kind of what kind of machine it is or motor, and then down to that. And then you want to get to the model number, and then you want to navigate down into when you want user documentation, or you want to have a service manual or something, and then you click on the specific manual, and then it opens up. Okay, and what they were doing, these people have greasy hands. Okay, they got greasy hands, so you want to make this as easy to navigate as possible. And it gets down to, and you come to the story about changing the oil filter, change the oil filter, and then you have the story of steps. And there's a lot of images in there too. Have pictures of the images of how to get to the oil filter and turn it, and make sure that you turn it clockwise or something, or counterclockwise 90 degrees or something, or turn the bolts was actually a thing of the whole clockwise. You turn it 90-degree angle, and that kind of thing. Um, and what this did was it really showed that um, this is the context. Now it's kind of like coming back to the thing of my example of the banker that was a geology student did cooking. Um, you know, if you think about the service manual, the service technicians, you got all these books, these manuals. They're really not usually not that thick. Usually a service manual is not too thick. It's a couple hundred pages. But they're you got when you got to use it, you've got to open it up and you got to break the binding of this little 200 page manual. You got to break the binding, get the manual to stay open so you can follow it. Okay, you got to break it. Okay, and don't we all have the same problem when you're doing cooking, where you get this thick book, the recipe book, okay, and they usually can be thin, but can be really thick, and you open up, and you're hoping that the weight of the big book will keep the pages open, but sometimes doesn't. So you put objects, don't you put like, um, uh, you know, bottles or things to hold the pages in place so it keeps the binding open without breaking the binding in the book, the recipe book, to keep it open so you can actually follow the recipe. And now don't we see that? That's years ago. But now, hey, people use their smartphones, don't they? They don't use their smartphones or the tablets to actually to follow the recipe because it's easier because you can scroll down with your fingers, right? Same thing that Caterpillar was doing back there 30 years ago with that touch screen to help people to navigate there. We're all doing it today with our touch screens, okay, um, on our recipe books, and so I'm telling this long. I've been at it for 40 minutes, but what I've been telling is a story that each of these examples shows that we are visual. Every single one of them is pointed that we are visual. We are human beings are visuals to start with. We learn things visually. We learn them in role playing. We learn them as children in role playing with our parents. Nothing's written, okay? Uh, or we go to school and then we get into written language and then we think of written and we are moving ourselves away and away and away and away, and actually written language is much farther away from normal spoken language. And I did a whole fellowship on this for 6 months recently at SAP a couple of years ago, and showing how it had moved the content consumption by the users is hard to do. So I had completely reworked it to try to make it so we could bring it back to conversational spoken language in different ways. And but written language is stilted. We actually, every time we edit things, we actually move it away from we move it farther and farther away from the language that we grew up with. We've turned it into stilted read speech rather than easy to comprehend. And I could do a whole just a video on that topic alone. But the thing here is, and I'm gonna come back. I'm bringing it back to full circle to the welding job. I believe that the welding job description was saying that when you read the assembly instructions for metal structures per specifications, that's talking about not about written text. It's talking about um, IKEA-like, visuals, and 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 that's not derogatory. I'm not being derogatory at all. Because the audience is really that well. That's what they would, and they need to have simple to follow instructions that are visual because they're doing a job that's tough to do. Okay, this is Flashdance. Okay, remember the girl in Flashdance? She's a welder, and you see the mask and stuff and doing that stuff. And can you see her like reading through a text? No, she needs something visual. Because it's big, got to get see it, got to do it, got to follow instructions. It's easy to consume, easy to consume, easy to consume. Okay. And so I think that those, when it says they're reading the plans for the assembly instructions thing, it's visual, okay? It's not reading. And again, I'm not being derogatory. I'm just saying that the audience that's the kind of material, that's the content you need for that kind of audience. But not just that audience. And I'll finish up here in saying that in the past 7 years, I've been making a lot of specifications and taking user requirements on some features, language solutions and things, and language technologies, and writing a lot of specifications and mock-ups and things like that. And I will say that I will probably have made. I spent more time in PowerPoint in the past 7 years than to pass my entire career. And I've made more PowerPoint slides than across my entire career. I spent more time coloring things than I feel like I'm in kindergarten again. Okay, and I'm not degrading that or something. I'm just saying that I'm spending a lot of time actually doing the color coding and doing images and doing screenshots and pictures of microphones to say speaking, and to do headsets to do hearing channel in, and arrows to show directions, and dotted lines to show connections, and using boxes with different colors to show databases or tools or had a person to show people. I do a lot of that, and what that has done is made it all very visual, and that's helped me move away completely from kind of a word-based document content thing to now doing visual explanations. And there's some specifications. I will do a lot of presentations about this to the kind of the decision makers. Do a lot of color coding and clustering and things. And I've had a couple negative comments, but I've had a lot of positive stuff, because it's really helped consume the information quickly and get the idea quickly, and and it just it's in a format that every single person has understands. It's just they've grown up with this, and it's moved away from PowerPoints. People that you put text on PowerPoints, folks, you're just like totally wrong. That's not what presentations are. Presentations, it's not a read. It's not. Don't do a pre-read of a PowerPoint. It's not made to do that. A presentation, PowerPoint's made to be a presentation. You speak, you explain, you do your presentation, and a lot of my presentation with PowerPoint are just bullet points, and I just tell the story, explain it, give the pitch, do something. That's what PowerPoint is for. If you want to do content writing, hey, use Word or Framework or what you want to do, or Notepad or something. But some people will try to put too much text in Excel, too much text in PowerPoint. That's not what the purpose. That's just not the right medium to do this. And so I will say that probably I've made 1,000 to 1,500 slides, individual slides over the past 7 years. I don't know the exact number, that are mostly visual, and that has really helped. I do a lot less Microsoft Word content now. I do a lot of things. I do a lot of videos. I explain. And a lot of here I'm in this long explanation, kind of explain because I'm showing a whole series of different contexts. But a lot of my videos, sometimes I'll do feature videos, and it'll take 15 minutes. Take 15 minutes to explain the whole feature. That's the kind of basic one. If you want the detailed version, I'll make a 30 to 45 minute where I go into each of the details about each of the parts of that different PowerPoint deck, the slide deck, and that's way easier for people to consume because they can speed up this. They can listen to the speed. They can speed it up to 1.5 in the video and watch it faster. And they don't have to. They can do this actually not while sitting down. They can actually listen to it while doing other things. People do this multitasking. So, and sometimes I tell people, hey, if you want to for this kind of thing, hey, you can even you can just listen to it in the car, while driving. I don't want to encourage people to not be concentrating on driving, but I listen to things while I'm in the car. Can listen to music, can listen to discussion. I even attend some kind of meetings in the car just to listen, not to participate and talk as much as possible. But it's possible to do that. And some video content makes it possible. So in video content, you actually the visuals too. Again, communication, all that. So I really believe, Robin, and I'm sorry it's taken 50 minutes to answer this. But I think the story is important because it tells the whole context of and gives multiple examples of supporting information, at least in my career of having done this in many different places and things. That it's not about reading it's not about literacy of written words on a page. It's more about that for that welder job. It was about the 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 context of visual descriptions for instructions to that. And I'll wrap up with the last statement that Barbara Streisand, and I don't believe that she was the one that actually responsible for the quote because I found it that the quotes came from other people, but she sang in a song in the 1970s. The and it really struck me because one of my classmates and one of the girls I kind of liked. That's why I remember the song. She sang us one of the Barbara Streisand songs, and the one of the statements in the song that I remember since I was age 12 was, "A picture is worth 1,000 words." A picture is worth 1,000 words, and when you get things to pictures, then people remember. Think about billboards. Think about the things. A lot of them picture and visually oriented to help you remember. So that's my thoughts about the whole welding thing, the welding job announcement, and how I think people really learn and consume information faster and better than by reading words. Thanks for listening, and appreciate your comments. And I know some people say it's too long, but yeah, this is story. That's what storytellers do. They tell a story to explain something. So have a good day, everybody.